All of you, all four of you, equally.
Wow, wow.
I don't think it's equal.
I was at Bitcoin all week. I didn't get an entrance like that. My God. I think I know which conference I prefer, obviously.
Come on, Bitcoin was a warm-up.
But Bitcoin was a warm-up compared to this, absolutely. Well, welcome, everybody. Wow, thank you so much for all being here. There's a lot of you out there. I'm Eleanor Terrett. Some of you might know me. And I am joined by three people who, frankly, need no introduction, but I'm going to give one anyway. Obviously, John Deaton, founder of... founder of the Deaton law firm, crypto law, and former US Senate candidate. And we have James Meta Lawman Murphy. And we have Cody Carbone, the CEO of the Digital Chamber of Commerce. So I wanted to start off today with a little fun segment. So if you guys remember last year, James moderated this panel last year, and he did a lightning round of predictions. And so I kind of want to go back to that, and I want to read back the answers that the panelists gave last year, and we're going to see where we are today, because I think it'll make some of you laugh, because it's quite pertinent to where we are today. So the first question James asked was, will stablecoin legislation pass and be signed by the president this year? Now keep in mind, this was May of 2024. Cody said no, John said no, Jeremy said yes, but that the president wouldn't know what he was signing. And could we just give a round of applause for Jeremy Hogan, who's not here, but should be?
What does it apply equally?
Second question was, assuming stablecoin legislation passes, will it give the Fed veto power over which entities can issue a stablecoin? John said, if legislation passes last year, yes. Jeremy said yes. Cody said no, arguing that the digital chamber wouldn't let it happen. And he was pretty right. So good job, Cody.
Thanks.
Will the SEC approve any spot Ethereum ETFs? Now, everybody said no. Everybody said no. And that was an interesting time, because this conference was it May last year, or am I like in a different time zone? It was, I think, early May, and there was some question as to whether the Ethereum spot ETFs would get approved. It was obviously Bitcoin was approved in January, but they did all end up getting approved. I think that was surprising to a lot of people. So all of you guys were wrong on that one. And then we talked about damages. What damages will Judge Torres award in the Ripple case? And Cody passed on this one. Don't blame him. John predicted 25 million. Jeremy said that there will be 0 damages, but $100 million in penalties. So I think he was the closest. But then bring that forward a little bit. Now we might be facing a $50 million penalty. So maybe John was the closest in the end. So you can give him a little kudos for that one. When will Judge Torres issue her ruling? Now, Cody predicted October 31st, Halloween. John said September. James guessed July, and Jeremy said August. Now, it was August 7th, 2024. Judge Torres ordered the company to pay $125 million civil penalty, and obviously as I just said, we've knocked that down to $50 million.
So your point is we're missing Jeremy.
We're missing Jeremy, yeah. Oh, well, I'm sure he's watching, or he will be watching at some point. Will the SEC, Ripple, or both appeal? Cody and John both said yes, both sides will appeal. That's exactly what happened. Jeremy said yes, unless Coinbase goes on appeal first. And then the final one was 12 months from then, would Gary Gensler still be SEC chair? And the unanimous prediction was no, and obviously that is where we stand today.
Good fucking riddance. Cody has to be a lot more professional than me.
Yeah.
Good fucking riddance.
There you go.
I want to go back to that $50 million penalty. I just want to get your guys' take on where we are right now. So let's talk about the Ripple case. Obviously, it's still going on, even though there was some. Everybody wants it to be over, right? It's still it's still tied up there, even though everybody else has pretty much gotten dismissed at this point. We saw Binance get dismissed yesterday. I know you guys are all sick of it. You guys are all sick of hearing, Judge Torres' name probably and the SEC's name. But John, where do we stand right now? I know we saw a development, 2 weeks ago where Judge Torres said that she would not approve a joint dismissal from the SEC and from Ripple. Can you kind of talk about where we stand right now? I know you did a live stream that was super helpful, but kind of just give our audience a little bit of an overview of where we are right now.
Well, basically, the SEC dropped their appeal. Remember, we won, XRP holders won. In the case, Judge Torres said XRP itself is not a security, secondary market sales. Immediately Coinbase, Kraken, Crypto.com, hour after the decision, relisted XRP. So we got our victory. Then Ripple had a split decision. Those early institutional sales they made, the judge said technically violated Section 5 of the Securities Act, and she fined $125 million. The SEC appealed. XRP itself's not a security, not so much that, but secondary sales. Ripple cross-appealed, saying those institutional sales, that they didn't violate the law. Gensler goes, the SEC changes course, a new election happens, new president, and the SEC agrees to withdraw their appeal on secondary sales, and then there's a settlement discussion where Ripple says, the SEC says to Ripple, you drop your cross-appeal, we'll agree that $125 million, you only pay $50 million. In other words, Ripple will get back $75 million of the $125 million they put in escrow, and will agree to ask the judge to lift the injunction. Now, the injunction is sort of this weird thing that just simply says, Ripple, you're not allowed to violate securities laws moving forward. But they don't want that, even though they don't think they did and they don't intend to. They just don't want that cloud hanging over them. So they agreed to go to the judge. The problem is the judge didn't rubber stamp it. She didn't just say, okay. She said, well, you cited the wrong rule, but even if you did cite the wrong rule, I wouldn't agree to this. You need to do more. And James is going to bring up some really good points on that. And what I said was, from her position, imagine your courtroom is tied up for years. If you were to count her time, the federal magistrate, Judge Netbird's time, her associates' time, her assistants, clerks, all of that, you're talking tens of millions of dollars just in her courtroom that was tied up. And now the SEC says, psych, we're just joking. We just want you to ignore the last 3 years of litigation because we're viewing XRP and other crypto tokens differently now. And she just said, not so fast. And I believe that she needs the SEC to give them more, which is, look, Judge, we asked you to give this injunction and you did, but look, it's a new landscape. We were slow on digital assets, and we were trying to take this 1946 case law and apply it to modern day blockchain technology, and we were trying to pigeonhole. And you know what? Congress is now working on a bill. We've got the Genius Act for stable coins, and there's going to be a market structures bill where they're going to classify what's digital securities, what's digital commodities, and Congress is actively speaking on this. It's in the best interest. Look, 75,000 XRP holders joined the case. The public wants this asset class. We're moving forward. This injunction and this settlement is in the best interest. You got to cross all those T's and dot all those I's and give her something more than, Judge, we came to an agreement. There was a new election. We want you to change your mind. She's not doing that. But I know James has some really, and one comment I said, and James can talk about it, or Cody, is I said, if I'm a judge, I'm sort of like, listen, I got other cases to deal with. If the government feels this way and this private company feels this way, unless it's really in the public's, not in the public's best interest, I'm just going to say fine and move on to my other cases. Judge Torres isn't doing that. So my one fear, I said, is if she lets politics get in the way, which is, oh, wait a minute, there's a Trump meme coin, and the Trump family's got this world liberty thing and stable coin, and I'm going against Trump. Just because there's a new president doesn't mean the law changed, and I said this is the law, and I'm sticking to it, almost as a reaction to the politics. That is the fear I have. I don't know which way she'll go, but I'll leave it to these two gentlemen to take it from here.
Yeah, I don't know which way she'll go either, and this is not legal advice, but there is a non-zero chance that the judge will decline to vacate the injunction, I believe. That's my opinion. And the reason is, whatever the SEC says to her, it is possible that her response is going to be, I'm not buying any of this. The only thing that has changed is the resident in the White House and the leadership at the SEC. And the standard to vacate an injunction is extraordinary circumstances. And she could say a change in the leadership of the SEC, a change in our government, is not the kind of extraordinary circumstance that the law has in mind to vacate an injunction that I took so much time and care in formulating after years of this case.
Now,
So
what would that mean for Ripple, James?
So
If she doesn't vacate the injunction?
I think if you take a few steps back, Ripple would have taken the deal, the judgment of Judge Torres of $125 million and the injunction, and settled on that basis and approach the SEC and say, let's just drop our appeals, we'll take the deal, we'll release the $125 million in escrow to you. But there was a change, there was an election. And so Ripple, I believe, went back and started negotiating, appropriately so, for a better deal. And that better deal has been revealed to all of us. Instead of $125 million, it's $50 million. And the original agreement was an agreement that the SEC would ask the judge to vacate the injunction. So my interpretation of all those facts is that they can still do a settlement even if the non-zero chance comes through and the judge refuses to vacate that injunction. They can still settle and settle on the basis of $50 million and give each other, drop the appeals and give each other releases that are binding on a future SEC. And I think that'd be a fantastic deal. And remember, this is kind of important. The injunction would be enforced by the SEC. The injunction that says Ripple do not violate the securities laws, the entity that enforces the securities laws is the SEC. The SEC has said there's no need for an injunction. So if you're Ripple, how worried are you in reality that the SEC, led by Paul Atkins, Hester Peirce, Mark Ueda, are going to do something with that injunction? I mean, so there's a period of, 3.5 years where if it were me, I would not be particularly concerned, even if the injunction stands.
And I think, the question is, what could be one of those extraordinary circumstances that would lead her to vacate the injunction? We're going to talk about it, I'm assuming. Market structure legislation,
Yep.
Getting a bipartisan bill passed through Congress, getting a rulemaking from the SEC. Chair Atkins has only been in his seat now for 2 months. And the crypto task force, while they have been very active, he is still understanding the lay of the land. I think we will start to see some of those rulemakings providing clarity to this industry very, very shortly. We've already seen a lot of guidance documents come out of the crypto task force. I think that's what we're looking for, and we're asking what could be one of those extraordinary circumstances.
Yeah, listen, just so you know, the injunction what James is talking about, if they settle right now, the injunction is not a big deal. The reason Ripple would want it removed is just in case the next presidential election, there's a different president, just in case the Senate flips and my previous opponent then becomes chairwoman of the Senate Banking Committee. And so it just gives you guidance, I guess moving forward, we wouldn't have another flip-flop of going back. But I think Ripple, when the SEC files their brief, Ripple will probably file a brief that says, look, why should they? There's this new landscape. There's going to be a bill, structures bill. They're moving forward, stablecoin legislation. Why should we be punished in the private market system with this cloud hanging over us that other blockchain enterprise corporations don't have? That is fundamentally unfair to us. And so, take that into consideration as well. But I think that's really what we're going to see. We're going to need to see the SEC basically submit something to her other than, we changed our mind.
Cody, you're familiar with Paul Atkins. Can you tell us a little bit about him? I know, he's been a little bit quiet since he was very quiet from when Trump nominated him in December until when he took office about a month ago. But he was involved in the digital chamber. Can you tell the XRP crowd here, what you know about Paul and what he's like personally and what you think he's going to do for the SEC?
He's a very cerebral gentleman. And so I'm not surprised that we haven't seen a ton come out from him since he's been confirmed as chair. I know for a fact that he wanted to go in there. That agency has been chaotic over the last few months, over the last few years. You've had a ton of departures. You had staff leaving. You had most of the enforcement staff were dedicated to focusing on crypto. There was just a lot of bad energy in that building in DC. And so Paul wanted to come in and understand exactly what he was working with. Does he have the right people around him? What are the various offices at the agency focused on? But in terms of what we have, in terms of a chairman and a gentleman going into that position, we couldn't ask for someone more qualified than Paul Atkins. He understands this industry. He understands this technology. He has been working with crypto companies for years, since he left the SEC. So he doesn't only have the institutional knowledge of the SEC and Washington, but he has the knowledge of the crypto companies. He was on our board of advisors of the Digital Chamber. He started our capital markets working group that was fighting back against Gary Gensler's SEC. He had a hand in all of our amicus briefs, like the one we wrote for Ripple. And He knows this industry better than anyone. And so we have an advocate now for the first time. I'm not surprised that we've seen so much activity come out of the crypto task force. Commissioner Peirce and Commissioner Ueda, the two Republican commissioners, both had worked for Paul and had that working relationship when he was back at the SEC under President George W. Bush. We have a good advocate there, and he's going to have our backs.
Good to know. What a vastly different place we're in now than we were last year. I just keep going back to that. I'm like, wow, so much has changed. I do want to talk about market structure. Yesterday, we saw the House Financial Services Committee and the House Ag Committee introduce the formal text for the Clarity Act, which is going to be the text for the market structure bill. We'll probably see it change a few times before it actually gets passed, but I do want to talk to Cody a little bit about this because I know you've sort of seen it at a high level. I've seen it at a high level. I haven't gotten into the weeds in it yet, but from your perspective as CEO of the Digital Chamber, Cody, you talk to these crypto companies, these representatives of the industry every single day. How are they feeling about it? How are you feeling about it? Is this a good text to be going forward?
It's hard to find any perfect bill in Washington. And as you mentioned, we're still reading through it. It's 200 plus pages. It dropped yesterday, but there was a discussion draft that came out a few weeks ago. This is the FIT bill from last Congress. So out with FIT, it's got a new title now. It's called the Clarity Act. This is the bill that'll draw those jurisdictional lines between the SEC and the CFTC. And so if you're going to issue a token, you know what you need to do, what agency you need to register with, who is going to have authority and oversight over you. If you're going to list a token, you know what you need to do to get registered, what are the disclosures that are needed. This bill is a behemoth. It's 200 plus pages. You mentioned there's two committees working on this bill because it has jurisdiction over the SEC, which is the House Financial Services Committee, and the CFTC, which is the House Agriculture Committee. The industry has a warm reception to the bill thus far. Again, it's hard to find a perfect bill when you have 200 plus pages. I will give a shout out to the members of Congress that are writing this bill. There has been a real concerted effort to talk to the industry and to sit down with them and understand what were the pain points. How do we avoid an era of Gary Gensler again, where there's just regulation by enforcement? How do we give the clarity to the companies in this space? I think if you had asked me this question last year when we were here, I would say, just get me a bill.
Right.
Like we are so desperate for that clarity, but that's when we were legislating against Gary Gensler. We are no longer legislating against Gary Gensler, and so the industry has a lot more say here, and they can provide a lot more feedback and to make this as perfect as possible where the US can lead on digital assets. So the bill is big. I would encourage everyone to read it. You're right, Ellie, there's going to be opportunities to provide more feedback. We're going to see a hearing, a joint hearing from House Financial Services Committee and House Ag Committee next Wednesday, June 4th. There's going to be markup on this text on June 10th. So they're moving very, very quickly. So if you want to provide feedback, and I would encourage everyone to read the bill and do so, the time is now. But we're in a good place, and we're going to finally get that clarity. We will never have a regulation by enforcement regime again.
I believe that there is a new stipulation in there, or it might have come from FIT. It was definitely in the discussion draft talking about this notion of digital commodities, right? There was digital securities, which nobody really understood what that meant. Digital asset securities was a term that the previous administration liked to use, but there was no legal definition surrounding that. But with digital commodities, it's basically all the tokens that have utility that are not, being issued by like a major company.
Can I ask him a question?
Yeah.
I'm putting Cody on the spot because, listen, what people are tired of is this flip-flop, right? We have the neck of the industry, the boot of the government's on the neck of the industry to now, meme coins from the president and all this, executive orders. But we also need some consumer protection, right? So if I have a Coinbase account and Coinbase files bankruptcy, my money, their money should not be considered property of Coinbase to pay for Coinbase's creditors, right? So is there any hope that we're going to see something, more than just the clarity of which agency's in charge, but 100% reserves, mandatory segregation of customer funds versus corporation funds, bankruptcy protection in case there is one? Is there any hope of that? At all. I'm sorry, I didn't prepare him for this.
No, it's a good question. And I'm proud to say in both the Market Structure Bill, the Clarity Act that is being proposed right now, and in both stablecoin bills, the Genius Act in the Senate and the Stable Act in the House, there is those consumer protections that you just mentioned, those bankruptcy protection, those fully segregated reserves, audits, independent audits for all of these issuers of their reserves, custody protections. That is something that has been very critical for both parties, Democrats and Republicans and this administration, that if we're going to have this technology, we can't just have it run rampant. Yes, it's great to have the jurisdictional clarity, but what is going to give an opening for all of the critics of this technology and the critics of this new asset class is if we have more black swan events like FTX and where people get hurt. No one wants to see anyone get hurt. And so huge sections of these bills are those consumer protections, are those investor protections, and I'm very, very proud that those are in there.
No, absolutely, and commend you and your organization.
I'm going to put you on the spot again, Cody, and then I promise I'll get to James and John. I know I'm
ready.
You can leave after this. You can leave after this.
Yeah, okay.
I have a question about Tether too. Is XRP a digital commodity in this bill?
XRP would be a digital commodity in this bill. It would be a network token. It is not an investment contract asset like the SEC alleged for years. It would be a commodity regulated under the CFTC.
Oh. There you go. You heard it here. I want to switch gears a little bit. James, you recently filed a lawsuit against the Department of Homeland Security, brave, trying to find out the identity of the elusive Satoshi Nakamoto. I know you've gotten a lot of pushback when that came out. That's obviously the Bitcoin maxis were not happy about that. But there has been a development today, and I just want to give you the opportunity to give our audience a rundown of maybe just a little bit about why you did this, but also what's the news there.
Let's give him a round of applause for doing it.
Beware retired lawyers with time on their hands. So if you're like me and you occasionally once or twice a week look on social media, you may have seen this mysterious account called DAI. And on that account, you would frequently see this video of a speech of a Department of Homeland Security senior person saying that the Department of Homeland Security had located, identified Satoshi Nakamoto and gone and interviewed him. And that Satoshi Nakamoto, when he was contacted, said, yeah, come on out, come to my house. I want to tell you all about Bitcoin. And by the way, there are 3 other people that helped me create Bitcoin. Let me introduce you to them as well. That sounded kind of weird to me because Satoshi Nakamoto has worked very hard to protect his identity. But I thought, if this is true, if this is possibly true that he has voluntarily disclosed his identity to the government, by the way, this is legal advice. We have a 4th Amendment here in the United States. If the FBI ever comes to your house, you don't have to talk to them. You don't have to talk to the government. You have the right to remain silent. So anyway, allegedly, Satoshi said, come on down. Let me tell you everything. And so maybe all of you have heard it, and that's become known as the 4 Satoshis video. And so I was curious as to whether this is true or false. Does the government have this information? And I think it's relevant because the government is talking about buying this asset that was created by Satoshi Nakamoto, buying Bitcoin. And so we, the public, should know what the government knows. I believe that as a general proposition, and I've been arguing and fighting for government transparency my whole professional life. So anyway, I sent a FOIA request to the Department of Homeland Security. They rejected the FOIA request, did a little rigmarole with them, and then I decided that I was going to pursue this in court, and so I hired the #1 lawyer in the United States in FOIA litigation. It's the same lawyer that represents Empower Oversight, and you all know who they are. And they're the ones, the only reason we've seen the Hinman documents, the Hinman report, and Inspector General's report, in any event.
Which turned out to be nothing.
Yeah, it's
A
funny.
whitewash cover-up, but I digress.
So one way of thinking about it is Hinman gives a free pass to Ethereum, then the Inspector General gives a free pass to Hinman. But anyway, so I filed the lawsuit to pursue our right as citizens to understand what the government knows. And I got a response today, and they did not move to dismiss the case. They filed an answer, and immediately thereafter, the judge who has the case in the District of Columbia has ordered the government to confer with my lawyer and establish a schedule and report back to the court within 4 weeks on the schedule that we're going to follow in the case. So it's moving kind of quickly. And the funny thing about it is I just looked at the filing. It just came out an hour ago, and it's signed by Janine Pirro.
Oh my gosh. My former colleague at Fox.
I'm a big fan, and so I'm hopeful that they'll do the right thing and that we won't have a year of litigation, that this government will decide to proactively share the information that they have with all of us, not just with me, but with the public. We're interested. We have a right to know what they know.
Interesting.
I think I commend this because, I was asked, did I believe that there would be a strategic Bitcoin reserve by executive order? And I said, I do. I believe that they'll do an executive order that says the 200,000 Bitcoin that the United States government has, that we're not going to sell that for 20 years. And of course, if a new president could change their mind. But I never envisioned that, and I own Bitcoin, I never envisioned that an executive order would direct the Commerce and Secretary and the U.S. Treasury Secretary to acquire Bitcoin in a budget neutral way. And the reason I thought that was because if you're the President of the United States and say, yes, I just, you know, we reevaluated America's gold, that increased our balance sheet by $1 trillion, and we're going to spend $100 billion buying Bitcoin, that's budget neutral. The next question might be, Mr. President, who's Satoshi Nakamoto? Right? And then and the person may say, well, before you use the people's money, don't you think you should know the identity? There's rumors it's Putin. There's rumors that it's this one or that one. And so I just thought that that would be kind of a sticking point. And I was wrong, because that executive order is as aggressive as I believe a president could be in an executive order. But that was my thought. Something I was wrong about, to be honest with you.
Well, no, you're not really wrong. I mean, Congress has not followed through. So Senator Lummis has this bill, the Bitcoin Act, which goes beyond the executive order and says the government shall acquire 1 million Bitcoin. Means spend money to acquire, and only Congress can authorize expenditures like that. That's where the budget neutral idea, that's why it exists. And I'm not real optimistic that you're going to get 60 senators to support the Bitcoin Act to acquire the 1 million Bitcoin. So it is a little bit stalled, and it's been a little quiet. You haven't heard from the Secretary of Treasury or Commerce with, here are 3 ideas on how we're going to do this. Well, so it's been a little quiet. Also, you'll recall there was supposed to be an audit of how much the government has in terms of Bitcoin and other tokens like XRP. And if that has happened, it has not been shared with the public, which is odd in my view.
Well, the latest on that, actually, Senator Lummis on stage at the Bitcoin conference said that information had been classified. So
Say that again?
That information has now been classified. So I think there was some consensus that the amount of Bitcoin that the U.S. government holds through, forfeiture and asset seizure was about 200,000 Bitcoin. So Senator Lummis said on stage that audit had happened, or at least, I don't know about XRP or any of the other assets, but that audit had been completed and the information has been classified, but she has been offered a private briefing on it. So that'll be an interesting thing to follow. But yeah, that was the latest on that. Cody, go ahead.
Well, to James' point on, where are these strategies to acquire Bitcoin from the Treasury Secretary and the Commerce Secretary that came from that March EO, where I'm looking to understand that and where I think, I'm hoping and guessing, that we'll start to know that is there's, from the executive order that came out on day 3 of the administration, that's created the White House Crypto Council. There was a 180-day deadline for all of these agencies to come up with their regulatory roadmap to ensure the U.S. leads on digital assets. And so these agencies have been working with the White House behind the scenes, and they've been coming up with, here's what rules we think we need, here's where there are gaps. And from what I have been told is that is what the Treasury Secretary and the Commerce Secretary are looking to, that hopefully those acquisition strategies will come in that 180-day, which is July 22nd, by the way, so circle that 180-day regulatory digital asset Bible that will be presented to the White House. Now, the question becomes after that, is that public? Mm-hmm. Do they release that to the people? I sure hope so, and I will advocate for that. Mm-hmm. But that is where I think we could see a change. I mean, when you talk to the Treasury and you talk to Commerce right now, they say, well, we're pretty busy with tariffs, but we'll get to it. But I'm circling that July 22nd date.
All right, July 22nd, we'll be watching. John, I want to get to you. All right, by show of hands, how many of you wanted to see John win against Elizabeth Warren last year?
Thank you.
You ran a great race. I don't think anybody can deny you that. And obviously you did not win, but you were super, I think just the way that you handled it.
I got to stand on stage and call her corrupt to her face. If that's not from the hood to it's all good, I don't know what is.
All right, so I'm going to ask you the question. Are we going to see a John Deaton run for Senate round 2? And the reason I asked this question is that there was a poll recently that was done by an independent group in Massachusetts that said John has a potential path forward to take on the junior senator from Massachusetts.
Junior
Senator. So remind me his name?
The junior senator is 80 years old, and his name's Ed Markey.
Ed Markey, that's it. Senator Ed Markey, who has been in Congress for 50 years.
Yeah.
Well,
John, listen, and I know there's people out there, you've come up to me and you said you contributed, to the campaign. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Listen, I announced February 20th. That's extraordinarily late. It was February 1st of the election year. You're 9 months before the general election. No one was stepping up. Her bill banned self-custody of Bitcoin in America and digital assets, which is Big Brother coming to life. She went on Meet the Press and said she was ready, America's ready for a Federal Reserve issued consumer CBDC, which would control your money, which would control your lives. And so I just said, I know the chances are pretty slim, but I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna announce, Massachusetts is very unique because I got my butt kicked in reality, right? 20 points, but my phone blew up the next day like, dude, you're the first guy to get over 40% in Massachusetts for Senate in 30 years. No one knew who you were, and so, and I gotta tell you what great this community is. So I put in some money in myself. I put $1 million up to try to give myself a shot. This guy, who didn't know me that well, he goes out there, and I get a text that says, look, I'm not going to be talking to you until after the election. I'm like, well, that kind of sucks, right? And then I found out, he started with his own money. He created a super PAC or helped create one. He went to people like the Winklevoss brothers and inspired others. He was the first to contribute to it. Then Brad Garlinghouse contributed to it. Cameron and Tyler contributed to it. Phil Potter contributed to it. And so this community is outstanding. And so I just want you to know, whether you donated or didn't, whether you're part of the 75,000, you stood on stage with me calling her corrupt to her face, and I appreciate it. Whether I run again, we'll see.
You didn't answer the question.
I'm a competitive guy, so I don't want to run again unless I think there's a real path to victory. And so we have a new president. If President Trump doesn't support me and would support someone else, I'm not interested in running a contested primary like that, even if I could win, because then you only have 9 weeks from the primary to the general election. But if there's no opponent in the primary, then there's a real shot to take that seat in Massachusetts. A lot of people don't realize that. Ed Markey, 60% of the populace don't want him to run. He's 80 years old. Look, I'm not a young man, but the first time he went to Washington, I was 9. Okay, and so that's why that poll showed that I could beat him. So if things line up that way, it's good, because the only person that could beat him in Massachusetts in a primary, believe it or not, is Ayanna Pressley, and she's as far left as you can get. So it would require him in a primary going so left that it would offend center-left voters, and we'd have a real shot to take that seat. So if that happens, I would do it again, but I'm not going to ask people for their money unless I think I honestly can win that seat for not just me, but for everybody that contributes to me and regular people.
2026 is coming up. It's kind of crazy. We're like halfway through 2025 already, but.
And if XRP's at double digits, you all can afford it.
There you go.
I just want to thank everybody for tolerating my constant tweets about let's support John, let's contribute to John. I was trying to come up with new ways of saying the exact same thing. And it just hit me that if you rearrange the letters of Deaton, it spells donate. And I put that out there to try to create a subliminal message that whenever you saw Deaton, you would feel this weird desire to donate to his campaign. And I'll tell you, for me personally, it was so much fun. I got to meet people, you know, the XRP community. We'd have events and people would come up and just we would embrace each other. This is a very, very special community you have here in XRP. You all know what you're talking about. You know what you hold. You know why you hold it. And you support each other. And it's just been an overwhelming experience for me to, I was here last year, and, you know, I'm not used to people coming up and hugging me, you know, other than my family. They do it. But in any event, supporting John, supporting someone who is just out there, and to me, it was not about crypto. John is a champion for one thing, and that's freedom. And so many people have died for the freedoms that we enjoy. I'll be damned if we're just going to stand by and let them float away and go into the hands of the government so that our children do not get to benefit and live that life of freedom where they can determine for themselves what kind of job they want to go after, or what they want to achieve in life, or whether they want to run in politics or whatever. That kind of freedom, John is our champion. And that, the easiest decision I've ever made is supporting John in any way I could. And I told him, the only thing I'm going to do is everything I can do.
How many here joined the 75,000? Raise your hand if you were part of 75,000. All right, you deserve a lot of credit. Trust me, 75,000 people from 143 countries around the world. We're talking about people in Qatar. We're talking about there's a war. There's Russian XRP holders, Ukrainian XRP holders that all joined to say to the SEC, fuck you, you don't speak for us. And you made a difference, I'm telling you. And no one can say that I'm BSing or I'm speculating. There were thousands, over 2,000 exhibits in the Ripple case. Go to her opinion. Out of 2,000 exhibits, she cites 36 or so exhibits. One of those exhibits are XRP holder affidavits. She cited you all who took the time to care and contributed in saying that XRP was not a security. So I might get a lot of the credit, but you deserve as much credit as I, because if you didn't do that, we would not have gotten that ruling the way we did. That's a fact.
And I don't think anyone here needs another reason to support John. But if you're looking for one, Senator Ed Markey has voted against every single crypto bill that has been put forward. Every single one. He has voted against Paul Atkins' confirmation, every single one of President Trump's nominees. He is bad for this industry. He's bad for Massachusetts. I hope you run again.
Well, thanks. We were on the gold standard when he went to Washington.
So much has happened. How do I follow that, really? I mean, so much has happened, on the regulatory level. Obviously, this panel is all about the new regulatory landscape that we've seen under this new administration, the new regulatory roadmap. It's not just the regulators that have, made significant changes. Ripple itself has done quite a lot since, last year. Let's talk about the Hidden Road acquisition, right? Potentially putting in a bid for Circle. We haven't actually confirmed that. We're not sure if that is entirely accurate, but I want to know, John, what is your take on what's Ripple trying to do here? What is Ripple's end goal with, the Hidden Road acquisition, potentially acquiring the biggest U.S. stablecoin issuer, Circle? What do you see those as their strategy here?
Well, if you look at what Ripple's done, while the lawsuit was, I said, and I know this is controversial to people outside of this community, I said that I think Brad Garlinghouse is the best crypto CEO in crypto, if you look at what he's accomplished. You know, you could argue what, you know, you could argue others, but the Hidden Road acquisition is probably, to me, the most significant crypto acquisition of all companies. It's a true integration of traditional finance coming into crypto. If you look at what crypto's done with Ripple, I should say, with Medico and standard custody, you know, you have this Ripple custody. And so, you know, I think the next thing Ripple seeks is probably some kind of banking license. But I think that it's going to be, you know, I know there's people in here who own pre-IPO shares of Ripple, no doubt. And I think that there's a good reason to do that. I think that they're going to be a top 5 crypto company moving forward.
Mm-hmm. James, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I talk to a lot of people who run hedge funds, and crypto hedge funds, and they uniformly say the thing that is missing in our industry is something called a prime broker, which is what Hidden Road is. And this, I don't think it's an overstatement, but if we had a legitimate prime broker in the picture, a major player, that Three Arrows Capital debacle, if you remember that, and kind of the dominoes that flowed from that, that probably would not have happened if we had had a prime broker in the hedge fund, crypto hedge fund space. So I think that's a really good business to be in. The most profitable business I've ever seen, and I've been representing finance companies for 35 years, the most profitable business I have ever seen is the stablecoin business. And if you look at the amount of money that Tether makes, you know, you pay the depositor $0, and then you invest the proceeds, and you don't have all of these people doing banking compliance. So banks have an enormous number of people doing compliance. It's very, very costly. The stablecoin business is the most profitable business I've ever seen, legal or illegal. I mean, it's more profitable than drug dealing. And the other thing that's very profitable is there are various terms. There's high frequency trading, but it can also be called automated market maker. That's a very profitable business. So there are 2 companies in traditional finance, Citadel and Virtu, that basically have no losing days trading in the markets. They are high frequency traders, automated market makers. So we're talking about some very profitable business lines that are out there and being discussed. And I agree with John's point on Brad Garlinghouse. So Brad refused to give the bully his lunch money when the SEC came around. And that set an example for the entire industry where they're like, wait a minute, you're telling me you can actually fight the SEC and make them prove their case and put them through the pain, that the pain is not just a one-way street? That was really important. And another thing he did is he supported John's campaign in a big way. And what I found in talking to a lot of very prominent names in the crypto business is they were fearful of supporting John. And the reason they were fearful, even though they're billionaires in some cases, the reason they were fearful is they thought, well, what if the Republicans don't take the Senate and Elizabeth Warren is still in there? She's going to take retribution against me and my business if I support John. Well, Brad Garlinghouse said, screw that. And to their credit, Cameron and Tyler Winklevoss, who run Gemini, which is a target for the anti-crypto army. They stood up. And so I've got tremendous respect for Garlinghouse standing up, when it counts, when it's not easy to do so.
Cody, from your perspective as CEO of the Digital Chamber, Fair Shake was obviously top of mind for many of your, say, portfolio companies, as it were. How big of a specter is Fair Shake in the 2026 election? I mean, we saw the Genius Act, have a little bit of a snafu in the Senate a couple weeks ago because some Democrats were putting up a protest, and I think it was Cedar Innovation Foundation, who's like the nonprofit arm of Fair Shake, came out and basically said, we really hope that these candidates that we backed in the 2024 election, these Democratic pro-crypto candidates, do the right thing. And then we saw a lot of them actually change course, Ruben Gallego being one of them. How are you expecting, this year to be kind of a replay of 2024 in terms of like crypto dominating the political finance campaign?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We needed for so long, at the Digital Chamber, we've been doing this for 11 years. There were some dark days going in and knocking on doors on Capitol Hill and trying to educate about this technology. One of the biggest changes, in addition to President Trump's support of the industry, was that political muscle and having the money come in from the industry. Members of Congress, what they care most about is getting reelected. They want to get reelected. I know it sounds cynical and it sucks, but they want to get reelected. They want to get jobs to their district. They want tax reform, but they really want to keep their job. And the way they keep their job is money in politics. And so the crypto industry coming in and just being a force, I think we were the biggest donor in terms of industry donations. That raised a lot of alarm bells for people. And it was the first time once this industry started coming in, whether it was Fair Shake and there's some other super PACs and just anyone giving from the crypto industry and just the industry being loud, all of the retail users being loud. It was the first time that members of Congress started coming to me, and instead of me knocking on their door, they were knocking on mine saying, what can we do for this industry?
Wow.
How can we be helpful? So it woke them up. And I would encourage everyone to keep giving and being active in the political space because it has made a huge difference, and that is why we're going to get legislation in the next few months.
Genius is pretty close to hopefully being passed, if the people I'm talking to are correct. We have an amendment process that's going to kick off next week. Let's talk about Tether a little bit. And Cody, I want to ask you, just because you have been covering this stuff, you see it, you've been talking to people about it. What kinds of provisions does Tether get in the Genius Act as it currently stands?
So Tether can exist in the way the Genius Act is written. I think that's the first question everyone asks.
Yep.
Any non-US domiciled stablecoin issuer, which Tether is not domiciled in the US right now, can get a license to issue stablecoins under the legislative text if approved by the Secretary of Treasury. They have to be able to show a few things, like that they can comply and follow all of the same rules as a US issuer can, that the governing body of where they are domiciled has the same standards as the US has, but Tether will be able to exist if it wants to. If it wants to continue to exist and have their USDT be accessible to US users, they will be able to do so under the bill. It was a provision that was critical, I think, in the Digital Chamber supporting it. The US is not going to lead on stablecoin adoption if Tether is not there. They're the biggest player by far. Mm-hmm. And so if the US wants to be the leader and we want to see all stablecoins in the entire globe backed by US dollars and not backed by yen or backed by euros, then Tether's going to have a role.
Mm-hmm. Do they become US compliant?
I'll have to ask Paolo. I think there's a chance they become US compliant and they can domicile here. I don't know for sure. They work very closely with Cantor Fitzgerald, who custodies their reserves in the United States. The former chairman of Cantor Fitzgerald is now the Secretary of Commerce. Right. So I wouldn't be surprised if there is still some friendly relations there and some guidance happening. So I wouldn't be surprised if we're sitting here in a few months as some of the rulemakings after this bill has been passed have come out and Tether is domiciled in the United States.
Okay. Interesting.
I mean, the real question is Tether today the Tether of 5 years ago? And I'm assuming that they're not, and a lot of people were critical of that, and I just said, listen, if the Commerce Secretary said that the reserves are there, and the CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald said the reserves are there, and for you to do that publicly and it not be true is such an exposure of liability that I said it makes me believe that they, maybe they faked it until they made it.
If they want to exist under this bill, they're going to have to show through an independent third-party audit that the reserves are there and that they are fully collateralized. Right. Those have been the questions on Tether forever. And so if they want to be compliant and have, access to the U.S. markets, they're going to have to show that.
Listen, Brad Garlinghouse himself said that stable coins market cap is going to 10x in the next 5 years. So there's a reason Ripple went with RLUSD. I believe that, in fact, I was right about one thing on Twitter. When that rumor was that Ripple was making a bid for Circle, I said, well, I know Coinbase is a minority shareholder in Circle. Are we going to see a bidding war? And literally a few days later, there was a report that Coinbase was making a play as well. So there's a reason being, and I think that stablecoin legislation does change the game.
98% of stablecoins worldwide right now are US dollar backed. Imagine what that is going. I'm hoping that's 100%. And we see that explosion once the legislation passes.
No, that's why I said it's not even a crypto bill, it's more of a dollar dominance bill.
It'd be great for the U.S. economy.
Because of that, 100%.
Huge explosion of a purchase of treasuries. That's good for the dollar.
Yeah.
James, what's your take on the President of the United States' involvement in the crypto industry? As a lawyer, how do you see that?
I'm glad you got that one in case I run.
It's a controversial topic, but I gotta ask it.
Good luck.
No comment.
I mean,
honestly,
let
I
me
was
set this up.
not thrilled that a meme coin was launched a few hours before the inauguration. I think that was not a good look for the crypto industry generally. But in terms of policy, the president has been, the guy just delivers exactly what he says he's going to do. And it's so shocking to everybody in Washington. What you're supposed to do is say, I'm going to do all these things. I'm going to fix the fraud and abuse in the budget, and then don't do it. That's what we're used to. So the guy puts Elon Musk, smartest man on the planet, maybe, in charge of getting rid of the fraud, abuse, and corruption in some of these programs. So, he's delivered on what he said he was going to do. And, I'm not thrilled about the meme coin, but at the same time, I am a big believer in freedom, and people should be entitled to go and incinerate their money any way they want to without the government telling them, without Elizabeth Warren saying, we're going to strike this option off of the American people's, choices in investment and this and this and this. And government gets to decide, the marketplace gets to decide, and discipline people. And speaking of which, there's a lot of fraud in crypto. And I really want to see fraudulent projects die. Looking around, I think many of you are old enough to remember the 1990s and the dot-com era, where all of these companies came out of the woodwork and added .com to the name of their company, and they had no business plan, no revenue, no profits, no nothing, and they came up with a new way to measure the success, and it was called eyeballs. This many eyeballs per day, week, whatever. Fortunately, what happened was there was a sorting. And the ones that did not have utility were killed. But the few that got it right became the largest, most successful businesses in the history of the world. And now we've got a new technology where this opportunity is reappearing the second time in our lifetimes, and there are going to be a few very big winners when it's all said and done, in my opinion.
Good answer. All right. We got about 30 seconds, but I want to do another lightning round because next year I want to come back and be able to read the predictions back to y'all and see what we came up with. So we're going to do this. We're going to do it as quickly as we can, but I've got a few here. So I'm going to start with John and we'll go down the line. Will we meet President Trump's August deadline for both market structure and stablecoin legislation to his desk?
Yes.
Nope.
Yes.
Will we see one packaged bill combining market structure and stablecoin, or will they be split?
Split.
Split.
Oh, I hate this question. I hope they would be split, but I think they'll be packaged.
Okay.
Another big, beautiful bill.
Yeah, big, beautiful crypto bill. Will John Deaton run again in the midterms?
I don't know.
What's that emoji? I hope so. I pray.
Cody?
Oh, yeah. I hope so.
Yeah, okay. Does Ripple become a bank?
In the next year, no, but eventually.
I believe Ripple will acquire banking licenses, yes.
Eventually.
Okay. Does Custodia get a master account and win the case?
Custodia?
Yeah, Caitlin Long's company, sorry.
God, I hope so.
That would allow crypto banks access to the Fed's payment system, which has so far not been allowed.
If you made me bet, I'd have to say no, but
Okay.
I'm rooting for her. I think she's a warrior.
The result in that case is supposed to come down any day now, so we had some news.
I'll guess yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Alrighty, and two more. Does President Trump get sued for his family crypto dealings eventually?
I mean, he gets sued. That doesn't mean they're successful, but yes, there'll be massive lawsuits.
Okay, James?
Yes, and a federal judge will enter some kind of injunction.
He'll probably end up being sued.
Okay, and last one. What date will we see the Ripple case conclude absolutely and completely?
In this year.
Or what date? And it doesn't have to be this year. What date do you think it will? Will it happen?
August 15th of this year.
Okay,
I'll say Labor Day.
Labor Day.
I'll say Halloween.
Cody likes his Halloween answer. Thank you, everybody.